Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Ever get that feeling where you know you should be doing something, but actually doing it feels impossible?
Like it's a million miles away.
Exactly. And that's what we're tackling today, that distance between thought and action.
We've got a Christian author who's really wrestling with this, and we're diving deep into a piece they wrote called 40,000 kilometers and 25 centimeters, the distance between brain and heart.
Catchy title.
Right, and they jump right in with this image of 40,000 kilometers.
Look, a lot of kilometers.
It is. It's the distance that the Monkey King, Sun Wukong, can travel in a single leap.
Like from here to, I don't know, the moon.
Basically, it's this huge, fantastical image that really captures that feeling of, this is impossible.
Yeah, like sometimes doing the right thing just feels that far out of reach.
Exactly. But then they bring it back down to Earth with the 25 centimeters.
So wait, are we going from space to like the size of a ruler now?
Pretty much. That's the author's actual measurement of the distance between their brain and their heart.
Oh, I get it. So they're using that to say it's not about physical distance, but the internal struggle between knowing and actually doing.
Exactly. They highlight that this is something we all deal with, and they even share personal examples from their own life.
Like what kind of examples?
Well, things like long-distance relationships, feeling homesick, even the ups and downs of parenting, just everyday stuff we can all relate to.
For sure. But it's not just personal stuff, right? They use all these metaphors too. The tortoise and the hare, the eager beaver versus the sloth. I even saw something about a Black Friday shopping spree.
Yeah, and each metaphor is like a different lens on this gap between knowing and doing. Take that Black Friday one, for example. Have you ever found yourself caught up in the frenzy, buying things you don't really need just because they're on sale?
Oh, definitely guilty of that.
That's the author's point. Sometimes we just act impulsively even when we know we shouldn't. Our desires kind of hijack our better judgment.
So like our wants overpower what we know is best.
Right. And then they bring in this idea of the brain and heart as the command centers, but it's our hands and feet that actually have to carry out the actions.
It's like they're saying thinking and feeling aren't enough. You got to actually do something.
Exactly. It's not enough to just know what's right or even to feel it in your heart.
Yeah.
You have to actually take action. And to really drive this point home, they share a pretty personal story about stealing money as a child.
Oh, wow. To buy what? Candy?
Worse, a video game. They knew it was wrong, but they really wanted that game, and that desire just kind of won out.
It's like knowing and doing are two different worlds sometimes.
It really can feel that way. And then the author takes this idea even further by bringing in the biblical perspective. They start with the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. You know, God tells them not to eat from the tree of knowledge, but they do it anyway.
It's kind of a classic story of knowing better but doing it anyway.
Yeah, and the author poses this interesting question. What if Adam and Eve had taken more time to really think about the consequences of their actions? Would things have been different?
It makes you wonder.
It really does. They're connecting their own personal struggle to this bigger idea of human weakness and disobedience, this struggle between knowing God's will and following our own desires. And it's like they're saying this has been a part of the human experience since the very beginning.
Right, from the very first humans.
Exactly. And then they don't stop there. They bring up another biblical example, the parable of the rich fool. This guy had all the time in the world to think about his choices, but he ends up focused on his wealth and his own comfort instead of spiritual matters.
You know, it's interesting because even today we're always being told to buy more stuff, get more stuff.
Absolutely. And the author is challenging us to think about our own priorities. Are we letting those messages influence us too much? Are we missing out on what's truly important because we're so focused on material wealth?
That's a really good point. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and lose sight of the bigger picture.
It really is. And finally, the author brings in the Apostle Paul, someone most Christians look up to, and they highlight his struggles with knowing and doing.
So it's not just us regular folks.
Nope. Even this giant of the faith struggled with this. They quote Romans 7.15, where Paul talks about doing the things he hates and not doing the things he knows he should be doing.
It's really comforting to know that we're not alone in this, that even someone like Paul had these struggles.
Exactly. It's normal to feel this tension between knowing and doing, even for people who are deeply devoted to their faith.
It is comforting. It
Right.
really is. To know we aren't alone in this and that even someone like Paul struggled with this too.
Yeah.
But it still makes you wonder if it's so universal, especially for Christians, why is it so hard to actually bridge that gap between knowing and doing?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's not an easy one to answer. The author doesn't give us a simple solution, but they point to a lot of different factors. We talked about time, motivation, desires, but there's also another big one at play here, and that's human weakness.
Human weakness. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. As Christians, we believe that people are inherently flawed, prone to temptation, prone to sin.
It's part of our nature, yeah.
Exactly. It's part of being human. And that weakness can make it so difficult to resist temptation and choose to do what's right, even when we know what we should be doing.
So it's not just about knowing what's right. It's about actually having the strength to do it.
You got it. And that's where faith comes in. In the Christian context, faith isn't just about believing certain things. It's about finding strength. It's about connecting to something bigger than ourselves, to God. And through that connection, we can find the strength and the motivation to overcome our weaknesses and start bridging that gap.
I get that in theory. But what does that actually look like practically? It's easy to say just rely on your faith, but how do you actually do that in your everyday life? Like, how do you tap into that strength?
That's where the author's emphasis on hands and feet comes back in. Remember how they talked about the brain and heart as these command centers?
Right.
Well, they were saying it's the hands and feet, the actions that really make the difference. Faith without works is dead.
You have to put your faith into action. You can't just think about it.
Exactly. You have to translate those beliefs into tangible things you do in every single part of your life.
Okay, so what? Like helping an old lady cross the road?
Sure, that could be one. But it could also be smaller things, like choosing to be kind to someone when you don't really feel like it, offering to help someone out even when you're busy, or even just resisting the urge to gossip. It's about those everyday choices that show your commitment to actually living out your faith.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about when it's something bigger than that? Like, what if you're struggling with a certain sin and you just can't seem to break free? How does faith help with that?
That's where things like prayer, studying the Bible, and connecting with other Christians becomes super important.
So you're not supposed to go through it alone.
Right. Those practices help nourish your faith and give you the strength and the guidance you need to overcome those bigger challenges.
It's like you have God and your community there to support you.
You got it. And it's also important to remember that no one's perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone stumbles and falls. But through faith, you can find the grace to forgive yourself and the strength to get back up and keep going. It's about constantly trying to live in a way that reflects your beliefs, knowing that you have God's grace to help you.
It sounds like bridging this gap is more like a lifelong journey, not a one-time thing you fix and then you're done.
Exactly. It's about continually growing spiritually. Remember that image of the Monkey King leaping 40,000 kilometers? Yeah. Well, that wasn't just a funny visual. It's a reminder that this journey can feel really daunting. Like, there will be times when you feel like you'll never bridge the gap, but it's a journey worth taking. And having faith as your guide can help you take it one step at a time.
I like that. One step at a time. But I have to be honest, I'm still a little stuck on this whole relying on faith thing. What does that really look like in the context of this struggle?
Mm-hmm.
How do you actually draw on that strength when you need it the most?
It's good to know that it's okay if it takes time. But I'm still wondering about what we can actually do about it. Like, what steps does the author suggest to actually bridge that gap when it feels so big?
Yeah, they don't exactly give us a step-by-step guide, but they do talk about some interesting themes. And one of the most important ones is mindfulness, being present in the moment and paying attention to your thoughts and motivations.
Mindfulness. I feel like that's such a buzzword these days, but how does it actually help with this knowing versus doing things, especially for Christians? It's about self-awareness. They emphasize that by really paying attention to your thoughts, you can start to see the patterns that lead to inaction. Like, are you making excuses? Are you putting off what's important for something that feels good right now? Are you letting fear or pride control your choices? Mindfulness can help you see those things and bring them out into the open.
So it's like hitting the pause button before you do something and asking yourself, wait, why am I choosing this? Is this even what I believe in? Is this what God wants from me?
Exactly. And they go even further, encouraging us to really look at what's behind our actions. Are you trying to please God or just trying to please people? Are you chasing stuff and status, or are you looking for real spiritual fulfillment? Being honest with yourself like that can be hard, but it's so important for growing.
That sounds like it takes a lot of thinking and praying. But the author also talks about relying on God's grace. Where does that fit in with all this mindfulness stuff?
That's where the real power of faith kicks in. You're not supposed to do this alone. As Christians, we believe that God is right there with us, helping us, giving us strength, and forgiving us when we mess up. And prayer and studying the Bible are like the tools that connect you to God and open you up to His grace.
So it's like a two-way street. You're trying your best to be mindful and make good choices, but you're also relying on God to help and guide you.
Exactly. And they remind us that it's not about being perfect. You're going to mess up sometimes, but it's about constantly trying, always trying to line up your actions with what you believe.
Okay, that makes sense. But it can still feel so overwhelming, like you have to change your whole life overnight. Is there anything else the author suggests?
Well, they talk about setting realistic goals. You're not going to change every bad habit or close that gap in one day. It's about taking small steps, focusing on one area at a time.
So instead of trying to jump 40,000 kilometers like the Monkey King, you're taking those 25-centimeter steps, just moving in the right direction.
Right. It's about progress, not perfection. And each step you take, even a tiny one, is something to celebrate. And they also talk about not giving up. This is going to be a long journey, and there will be times you slip up.
Times when you fall back into old habits or just feel discouraged.
Exactly. But that's normal and it's okay. But that's when faith is really important. Remember that God is always there, even when you fail or you start to doubt. Lean on your community for support. Trust that God will help you get back up and keep going.
This has been a really insightful deep dive. We've looked at this whole knowing and doing thing from so many angles. Personal stories, metaphors, the Bible, and even practical steps. But what really sticks with me is this feeling of hope and encouragement, that even though it's hard, it's a journey worth taking, and we don't have to do it alone.
I agree. They managed to bring together personal experience, theology, and practical advice in a way that I think will resonate with anyone on a journey of faith. It's a good reminder that we're all in this together, trying to live in a way that reflects our beliefs and honors God.
So what does this mean for you listening right now? What really stood out to you today? What 25-centimeter steps can you take today to start bridging the gap? Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about taking those steps, and every step you take is a victory. So until next time on The Deep Dive, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep working towards a life that truly reflects your faith.